Hey guys, how are you? Hope you're all doing very well. This evening I'm going to be doing a review of a horror film from the United States. Now this is a sequel. Now I think it's the United States because on IMDb it says USA. But I have been wrong before. IMDb has led me in the wrong direction. The first film was apparently a Dutch movie, although it's spoken in English. I got into a little bit of trouble saying it was an American film. So I'm going to say this is an American film based on what IMDb is saying, but if I am wrong, feel free to correct me. So it's actually based in London, the actual film, so I don't know if it's a British movie, it's a Dutch director, so I don't know if it's a Dutch movie, but it says American. So anyway, it's an American horror film. It is a sequel, English language, released in the year 2011, directed by Tom Six, and this film is called The Human Centipede, Part 2, Full Sequence. And the story to this film is as follows. Martin Lomax works as a night watchman in an underground car park. He spends his evenings obsessing over a DVD of the first Human Centipede first sequence. When his obsession becomes mania, he sets out about creating his own Human Centipede. But 3 victims is not enough for Martin. He wants 12, and so the nightmare begins. So the movie starts off with Martin Lomax. He is a very lonely individual. He is partly mentally retarded, so he can't connect with the outside world. He's constantly bullied, and he spends his evenings working as a night watchman for this underground car park. Now, to pass the time, he is obsessing over the Human Centipede first sequence, which was the first film. So he's obsessing over this, and his fantasy is to make his own Human Centipede. But 3 victims, as the movie depicts, as not enough. He wants 12 people to make up a mega Human Centipede. So he sets out about finding victims for this centipede, and the victims consist of the people that have been giving him a hard time in his outside world. So whether or not he can achieve his masterpiece is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on the Human Centipede 2. I had my hesitation coming to this one because of the fact I hated the first one. I thought the first one was just a lame attempt at gaining attention. It was all about being as extreme as possible, and in the meantime they've forgotten what makes a film good, and that is attention to details as far as characters are concerned. But this movie, the first one, was more concerned about making something as repulsive as possible. And I thought Tom Six missed a treat in the first one. I thought it had grounds to be a truly disturbing film, but it was a juvenile film rather than a good film. So coming into the second one, I had my skepticism. I will say that the second one is a better film than the first one, but having said that, that's not saying much because this is still a pretty ordinary film. Now, what I liked about the movie, I'll start off with the positives. Now, unfortunately, there are far more negatives than positives, but the positives is that this movie kind of feels like more of an artistic film, and it kind of gives you inside the shoes of this demented person. The first one, the character, the villain, was so far exaggerated that you felt no realism towards it. It felt like he was a villain out of a Inspector Gadget episode. He just exaggerated laugh and the evil laugh, and it came across as laughable rather than truly disturbing. Whereas in this movie, still has that laughable quality, but I thought the villain was a lot better. The guy who played the villain of Martin, I thought he did a good job because he doesn't actually speak. So it relied on body language. And in some parts, you kind of feel sorry for him. And in other parts, you feel that he is exaggerating it. So it's kind of like Tom Six has balanced out this character a little bit more, but it falls victim to what the first film fell victim to, was that laughable, exaggerated quality. And that goes through the entire movie in both films, in that the director is more concerned about exaggerating the point rather than creating something realistic. Now, I like the fact that it was in black and white. I thought that contributed to the lonely existence that Martin felt. Very dreary film, and I thought the black and white was an interesting way to go about it. So it gives it a little bit more of an artistic approach than the first one. And then I also like the life imitating, or art imitating life. It kind of felt like in this film it was a universe within a universe, as far as the movie doesn't continue on from the first one. The movie is about this fan who has been too obsessed with this horror film. And that's every person's nightmare who is not a horror fan. You see a lot of opinions about horror fans being that they're worried that these horror fans are going to get so obsessed with the films that they're going to become monsters. And this film kind of plays on that stupid attitude where you've got people who are influenced by what they see on the screen. So it is art imitating life. And I thought that was really interesting, and I thought it was a really good way to make a second film rather than exhaust the possibilities, of a usual film where you've got a copycat in the same sort of universe. But that I actually thought was a good point that Tom Six had. whereas it's making a stance against the people who have these attitudes that, horror fans are going to do the things that they watch. And in this case, that's the truth, and it's playing on that fear that other people outside the horror world have of horror fans. So I like that aspect of it as well. I thought there were some genuinely spine-chilling scenes, some really repulsive scenes. And as far as an extreme film is concerned, it does deliver that. So I thought that it had balls to show you that it was prepared to go outside the boundaries, and it wasn't appealing to the masses as far as Hollywood horror films are concerned. So I like that aspect of it as well. I thought there were some very interesting panning shots. I thought the camera angles were inventive. But ultimately, what lets the film down is what lets the first one down, is the fact that it wants to be too extreme. He's going so far to provoke a response that it feels like, instead of a filmmaker who is sort of like Gaspar Noé, who does it in a very subtle way, this film director wants to push the boundaries so far that it feels like that's all he's concerned about. All he wants is something to repulse the audience, to make the audience think that he's the most extreme director going around. In promos for this film, he says that it's the sickest film, that he's got death threats, that he's a bad guy. And it feels like he's so desperate for attention. He's that kid in the classroom. He's banging, making all the noise so everyone will look at him. He doesn't want to get the attention through a subtlety. He doesn't want to get the attention through good filmmaking. He just wants to get the attention through what you see on the screen. And that's ultimately his downfall. And ultimately why I see Tom Six as a very immature director. Now, he could have had grounds for something very deep and meaningful. There are some scenes concerning Martin's upbringing that I thought were very good. There was one scene involving his doctor where I thought, ooh, something a little bit dodgy is going on there. What the hell is it? And that level of uncertainty makes you ask questions. And I thought that if that was left up to the viewer's imagination, it would have been a lot better, because after a while, once he's left a little bit of uncertainty in the viewer's mind, after a while he makes it obvious. So all that uncertainty is out the window, and you feel to yourself, well, what was the point of that build-up? What was the point of that subtlety when a few minutes later you're going to explain it all? And so I thought the director had something but didn't realise he had something, and then he just has to make it obvious, and it felt like he was cutting corners, to be honest. There was no real build-up. I felt to myself, why do I care about this character of Martin? He had these things in his childhood that were quite daunting, but then it never leaves anything up to the imagination. It always has to explain things that would have been better if it was left alone. It would have been better if the director had confidence in his build-up rather than splashing things that will shock you within 10 seconds, as opposed to letting something slowly cook and then boil over at the end. Everything has to be in your face, so it feels like a collection of scenes that are one after the other of this shocking material that nothing is, as far as seeing less is best, none of that applies in this film. It's all in your face, it's all obvious, and it feels to me that the director is just more concerned about being extreme than making a great film. I thought the acting was deplorable. Apart from the guy who played Martin, I thought he did a decent job, but the rest of it was crap because it was so exaggerated. There was no room for realism in this movie, and it felt like he just wanted to push the boundaries, and in the meantime he was going to completely destroy all sense of realism, therefore destroy all sense of disturbingness. And instead of being disturbing, it's repulsive. I will grant him the fact that it is extreme, but this is a case of being too extreme, and in the end what you get is a very immature film. It feels like the Aristocrats joke. Now, if you're a fan of the Aristocrats jokes, you say the most repulsive thing you can possibly imagine, then you say, and then it was the Aristocrats. If you're familiar with that joke, you know what I'm talking about, and this felt like an Aristocrats joke. He wanted to make something so vile, so repulsive, and then splash it on the screen and say, hey, look at me, I'm a bad boy. And in the end, what you get is just a feeble attempt at gaining attention. It is immature filmmaking. I think Tom Six is not a good filmmaker, very, very immature, and he has a lot of growing up to do, because all this is a collection of scenes that will make you repulsed, but in the end, what you get is a director who is desperately seeking attention. And as far as I'm concerned, this is a very ordinary film. If you see it on the shelf, I would say pass up the opportunity, because you won't be missing anything. So overall, for the Human Centipede, because of the positives, I'm going to give it half a star, but as unfortunately all the negatives prevent it from being a film that is worth your time. So definitely is not coming recommended. Alright guys, that's my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.